Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the C-Files. Thank you for joining us. You know, we are living in very, very complex and difficult times. We're living in a time of death and destruction. It's horrific to watch. And regardless if it's Jews being slaughtered by a terrorist attack, or innocent women and children and families being slaughtered by emotional responses of revenge, it's horrific and it's horrible. Innocent people are dying on both sides. And the problem that we're having, folks, is that we've been conditioned by the mainstream media to believe things that are not true. They have been using mind manipulation techniques developed in the Tavistock Institute to push certain narratives, certain agendas, to get us to believe what they want us to believe. And they will use any means possible to manipulate us, to trick us, to deceive us. Now, most of you folks are kind-hearted people. I'm convinced of that. When you see devastation, when you see mass murder, when you see people being shot down on camera, and you believe it to be real, there's a sense of moral outrage that occurs. And with that moral outrage comes a desire to bring justice against the people who committed that act of genocide, that act of mass murder. And this past week, we have witnessed the presentation of such an event to the world as videos come out of paragliders coming out of the sky, and then reports of mass murder occurring after that in Israel. Now, I'm not going to spend time talking about how gullible and easily deceived the public is. How easily deceived we are when someone wants to create a false image or a false world for us to view and to live in. And it's easy for them to do that. And with the power of the media and the power of music and the power of stories, it's easy for me, if I wanted to, I know how to do it, to put out a story and get some computer generated images, get some crisis actors together, do some short cuts of films, put it out to the public, and create outrage among the public, and then point my finger at a particular group and say, they're responsible. Let's go wipe them out and turn them into a parking lot. And that group that I point to may be completely and utterly innocent of this horrible crime, this horrible act of genocide. And yet, because I stir the emotions with the images and the stories and the lies that I put out, I'm able to manipulate and control the thinking and mindset of the public and stir them up against the group that I want them to be stirred up against, to go after that group and to destroy them. On your screen is the destruction that has occurred in Palestine. Did you know there are 35% of Palestine are Christians? Did you know that there are about 2 million people trapped in a literal prison along the Gaza Strip? Did you know that they've been living in deplorable conditions for years? And did you know that some of the images that you're seeing on television, and they're saying this is what the Palestinians are doing to the children, this is what the Palestinians are doing to this or that, because what they've done is they have associated Hamas with Palestine in your mind. So when you think Hamas, you're thinking, oh, all Palestinians are Hamas. And the mass mental programming at that point has been successful. And the people that want to stir you in a certain direction, to get you angry at a certain group of people, and to go and attack them and destroy them, well, they've already manipulated your mind. They've already used psychological warfare against you to get you to do what they want you to do, to think what they want you to think, and to say what they want you to say. And the Pied Piper plays his pipe, and the thoroughly brainwashed, the thoroughly mind manipulated, follow along behind the Pied Piper into death and destruction. This is what I'm seeing, folks. Whether it be Hamas murdering women and children, or whether it be Israel targeting civilian targets and destroying mass numbers of women and children, innocent civilians, in one strike, with total destruction of a city block. It's horrendous either way. It's devastating either way. It's the death and destruction of innocent people either way. Folks, I'm not pro-Israel, and I'm not pro-Palestinian. You know what I am? I'm anti-genocide. I'm anti the murder of innocent people. Rather it be an individual doing it, or rather it be a government doing it. Let's begin with this young lady. Let me get this on here. All right, let's get this set up. There we are. Now this is the Crow House on YouTube.
There once was a land called Palestine, where Christians, Muslims and Jews lived fine. In the 1800s it was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Meanwhile a bearded guy founded Zionists for Jews to aspire, a land that becomes their home and safe only for their kind. Then there was World War I that ended when the Allies won, and England was like, hey, this beautiful land is totally mine. Till the name was Palestine, even though it was colonized, and a promise for a Zionist state was made by a man that had no right. Then more and more Jews arrived seeking refuge, and that's alright, and until their plan to steal the land was no longer to hide. The year was 1948 when Israel bullied its way into a state. Thousands of Palestinians fled their homes to survive. No right for return, no right for a home, no right to fight for the land that they owned. Israel expanded more and more into an apartheid. Where is your humanity? Where is your respect for dignity? Call it conflict, that's insanity. It's time to change your mind. One day Palestine will be free, so be on the right side of history. You're not anti-Semitic if you stand against war crimes. Don't be brainwashed by the news. Now you can see for yourself the truth. Learn about the story of Palestine.
על מקק שעבר מתחת לגדר, היו מקפיצים את כל הגזרה. איך נכנסו עם טרקטורים 400 איש ואף אחד לא שם לב. טוב, אין מצב בעולם שיכולה להיות כזאת התקרבות לגדר, אוקיי? מבלי שאנחנו לא נדע מזה. התצפיתניות יושבות בבונקרים 4 שעות, הן לא יכולות לעשות ככה, הן מול מסך.
אין מצב שצה"ל, אין מצב שהשב"כ, קודם כל מודיעינית, לא ידעו על זה. אין מצב שצה"ל לא ישר הגיב, לא חיל אוויר, לא טנקים. מהרצועה, אני זוכר, אני הייתי בנחל עוז, תוך שניות הגיעו מאות רכבים.
What happened to the strongest army in the world? How come border crossings were wide open? Something is very wrong here. Something is very strange.
Ladies and gentlemen, the lady that spoke, the last lady there that spoke, she was formerly military intelligence with the IDF. And she's really, really perplexed by how the attack on Israel occurred and how it went down, because she said that it's utterly impossible for what happened to happen. They had to have an order to stand down, or had to have been involved in the attack in order for it to happen. Something's not right. We are not being told the truth, ladies and gentlemen. We are not being told the truth. More than 600 killed, more than 2,900 wounded. Now you say, but that's Hamas. They're killing Hamas. That's what the propaganda news is telling you. But the reality, ladies and gentlemen, is the people who are being killed are innocent women and children, and innocent men who had nothing to do with the attack on Israel. Absolutely nothing to do with that attack. Now, there are those who are even beginning to believe that the attack on Israel was a false flag event. There are others that are doubting that there was any real, a lot of things that they were saying, they're starting to doubt that it happened at all, because of the fact that when you look at images, there are things that are not right. Things don't look right. There are problems with some of the images that are being showed on that attack. So in reality, folks, as I sit here now, I can tell you this. I don't know what happened. I don't know what's true and what's not true. I don't know what's faked and what's real. I have no way of knowing one way or the other. So the only thing I can do is assume that what the propaganda media is showing us, because, they're so trustworthy, right? I do not trust the propaganda media, folks. Not at all. But for the sake of presentation and argument, I'll assume that what they're telling us is accurate and true. If that were the case, then Hamas needs to be held responsible and dealt with in that horrific attack. But what's happening? Are they attacking Hamas? Or is this an opportunity to go after a people that has been under persecution for a very, very long time and living in dire conditions for a very, very long time and living in a literal prison along the Gaza Strip for a very, very long time, and have been targeted not because they're terrorists, but because they're Palestinians. We need to learn how to discern and distinguish between normal people just trying to live their lives, who just happen to be a very hated minority because of their ethnicity, distinguish between that and real terrorists who actually go out and commit horrible acts. We need more discernment as Western Christians. Because if we don't have that kind of discernment, what we end up doing is we end up condemning our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who happen to live in Palestine. And we end up becoming the enemy and the oppressive persecutor of our brothers and sisters in Christ. Think about that, folks. 35% of the people in Palestine were Christians. Peaceful, Christ-loving Christians. Now, anyone who thinks they are Hamas terrorists, well, God help you, because you need a lot of help.
Folks, we are witnessing a genocide of unprecedented proportions being waged against the people of Gaza Strip based on a false flag. There is absolutely no question that this was a false flag attack. At the very best, Israel was forewarned of the attack and had knowledge that it was going to happen. There's all sorts of evidence that have come out. The Egyptian government was warning them for at least 2 weeks that this was going to happen. And right at that time, Israel pulls all the troops off the southern border of Israel, moves them all over to West Bank, and then suddenly we see all these Hamas flying in on paragliders and just driving across the border. And it takes Israel a full 8 hours to send any response.
8 hours. 8 hours. And the lady that worked for the IDF, who was an intelligence agent that you saw earlier, said that's not right. Because when she was sitting on the border, guarding the border of Israel, when she was in the IDF, as an intelligence specialist, she said it would take literally minutes, if not an instantaneous response. It would have been utterly impossible for paragliders to come over and attack. Utterly impossible. They would have been taken out before they could even get near Israel. So what's going on? What's the real truth? And why are we being lied to? Well, let's move on. I have more. Here's let me go back over here. Here is what this is partially what the West is thinking as far as Christians, and this is going to show how we as Western Christians need to really, really step back and do some self-examination.
Israel is God's chosen people, always have been God's chosen people, always will be God's chosen people.
In my last video, I walked through Bethlehem's walled-off streets and met Palestinian Christians fighting to stay on their land. But I kept thinking about how some of Israel's biggest supporters back home are not necessarily American Jews, but evangelical Christians.
Most Christians will tell you, well, we love Israel because God says, I will bless those who bless my people.
So why do American evangelicals support a state that directly hurts Palestinians, including their fellow Christians?
You have my sisters and brothers who are supposed to be my support, actually doing all their best to support the ones who are oppressing us. It makes me angry.
Here's something that might surprise you. White evangelical Christians in the U.S. are more than twice as likely as American Jews to believe that God gave Israel to the Jewish people. Now, not all evangelicals believe this, but the ones that do, their voices are often the loudest and most influential.
The title deed to the land of Israel is recorded in the Bible, which gives the Jewish people a clear and unclouded title to that land forever. It belongs to them, and it belongs to them only.
Okay, now I've already discussed this in my previous videos. Who is true Israel? This is John Hagee. He's a very famous pastor in America. And his theology is one of Schofield-style dispensational Zionism, dispensational premillennialism that believes that, well, basically, he kind of has the attitude that Israel can do no wrong. And anyone who Israel goes after, anyone Israel points to and says that's an enemy of Israel, well, then that group and those people can do no right. Now, folks, Israel today is vastly and mostly atheistic, with a small number of a minority in Israel that believe in God of some sort. Christians are persecuted in Israel. Did you know that? And did you know that they were mostly atheists in Israel at this time? And I've talked about in previous videos the fact that for God to restore Israel, they have to turn to their Messiah. And they have not done that. Israel never goes back into the land until they turn back to the Messiah. And we keep saying that, oh, this was an act of God returning them to the land. We'll also presented in a previous video the Balfour Declaration. And the Balfour Declaration was written by Mr. Balfour to Lord Rothschild, who was a Luciferian, a Satan worshiper, and a member of what we know now as the New World Order. People say, that, well, the Wikipedia pop up saying New World Order is a conspiracy theory. YouTube loves to do this. They love to find some kind of contrary thing to what you're saying and pop it up there as if what the person in the video is saying is just an opinion, but what YouTube puts up, that's authoritative. Or what Wikipedia says, that's authoritative. Or what Snopes says, that's authoritative. But the reality is, none of that is true. So, Hagee, it would seem, based upon what I've seen of him, would believe that in this current conflict, that Israel could do no wrong no matter what they do, and we have to support them no matter what, and Palestinians can do no right. And no matter what they do, or how wonderful of a loving Christian attitude many Palestinians might have, they just can't do anything right. I mean, they are, if they are perceived by the world to be the enemy of Israel, then they must be condemned. This would be Hagee's position. Did you know that Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus Christ, is in Palestine? Behind the wall? In Palestine today is Bethlehem. Think about that. We're approaching a season when the Christian world celebrates the incarnation of Christ. Our Palestinian Christian brothers and sisters in Palestine are being subjected to devastating death and destruction. What will be our response in the West, Christian? Will we offer aid? Will we offer our love and prayers to those Palestinian Christians? Or will we do a John Hagee and condemn our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ in favor of calling atheists and Judaizers who have rebelled and rejected their Messiah, calling them God's chosen people? They are not God's chosen people. God's chosen people, it has been throughout the ages, from the time of Abraham on up, God's chosen people is the remnant, the redeemed. And it always has been God's chosen people. And that is true Israel. Only the redeemed, only those who are in Christ. In the Old Covenant, it was those who looked forward to the Messiah. Abraham believed God and it was counted unto him for righteousness, right? We're saved the same way today by believing on Jesus Christ. We are counted for righteousness. I'll continue. Oops, sorry. Lost.
And Christians fighting to stay on their land. But I kept thinking about how some of Israel's biggest supporters back home are not necessarily American.
Let me jump ahead a little bit, folks. Here we go.
Evangelicals support a state that directly hurts Palestinians, including their fellow Christians.
You have my sisters and brothers who are supposed to be my support, actually doing all their best to support the ones who are oppressing us. It makes me angry.
Okay, let's move on up.
To believe that God gave Israel to the Jewish people. Now, not all evangelicals believe this, but the ones that do, their voices are often the loudest and most influential.
The title deed to the land of Israel is recorded in the Bible, which gives the Jewish people a clear and unclouded title to that land forever.
Do you hear what he's saying? Even if they commit mass genocide against the Palestinians, we have to support Israel in that genocide so they can take that land because the land belongs to them. Folks, God devastated Israel in AD 70 when the Roman army went in, flattened Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and scattered them, whoever was left alive after that huge slaughter that occurred, scattered them throughout the Roman Empire. And they were under judgment of God. Folks, that judgment of God against them has never been lifted. It's never been lifted because they never turned to their Messiah. Paul said, I turned to the Gentiles. And the Gentiles were grafted into the olive tree. And today, I'll say it again, I've said it before. Today, Israel is the church. You say that's replacement theology. I'll tell you what replacement theology is. Replacement theology is replacing the church, the redeemed, the true chosen of God, with unbelieving, atheistic Israel. That is replacement theology. Let's catch just a little bit more.
Belongs to them, and it belongs to them only.
People.
There's one simple
okay, we've got an advertisement. Hold on.
Can use to improve their hearing.
We get past the advertisement. There we go.
People that share this view are called Christian Zionists. They believe the Bible commands them to support and defend the modern-day state of Israel, regardless of what this means for the Palestinians who live under its occupation. They point to one biblical verse in particular, Genesis 12:3, that they believe references the modern state of Israel.
Genesis 12, here it is in the very beginning of the Bible. I'll bless and I'll curse those who curse her.
All right. Who does that apply to, folks? Does that apply to rebellious Israel that is rebelling against their Messiah? Or does that apply to the believing Jews and believing Gentiles who make up the olive tree, which is Israel, New Jerusalem, believing Israel, true Israel? Which one does that apply to? And you're going to see the fallacy in this wonderful Christian lady, but you're going to see the fallacy in her thinking.
Sharon Sanders in Jerusalem. She's an American Christian who moved here from Illinois in the 1980s out of a deep religious sense of mission to support Israel. She and her husband founded the charity Christian Friends of Israel, which aims to help people from recent Jewish immigrants to Israeli soldiers.
Just simply kindness of the heart to say thank you for protecting us. Thank you for taking care of the land.
Her charity is one of several foreign Christian-led organizations that have flourished in Israel in recent years. It's estimated that every year evangelicals give around $200 million to Israel. Worldwide donations from the Jewish community far surpass that, but Christian contributions continue to rise and show no signs of slowing down. And some organizations specifically raise money for Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, which are illegal under international law.
We're talking about millions of dollars and political support that is used to continue my oppression.
That's Munzir Ishaq, a Palestinian Christian pastor who lives in Bethlehem, the city where Jesus is believed to have been born, that's now surrounded by this massive wall. It's one of the most imposing parts of Israel's military occupation of Bethlehem and other Palestinian territories, an occupation that's now over 50 years old, meaning several generations of Palestinians have never known freedom.
When you support a specific state who has racist policies and is enforcing an apartheid state, that would be unbiblical in my mind, right? That wouldn't be loving thy neighbor as yourself.
We read the same Bible, but then they are using the Bible as a weapon against me. We Christians call the Bible Injil, the good news. So they've turned the good news into our nightmare.
Why is their read of the Bible so different?
Evangelicals read the Bible in a very literal and simple way. They believe that you have to bless Israel so that God blesses you. So it's like Israel becomes a gauge of whether you receive blessing from God. Makes me wonder what kind of God they are meeting in the Bible. The God I meet in the Bible is a God of love, is a God of peace. They see in it an image of God who's a tribal God who favors one nation over everyone else based on a promise that's thousands of years old.
But for Christian Zionists like Sharon, that promise is prophecy. Many believe that the establishment of Israel in 1948, which displaced the majority of the Palestinians who lived there, was all part of God's divine plan.
We see all over God's word that the Jewish people at a certain point in history would begin to find their way back home. And we know that happened in May 1948 when the state became a real nation. And ever since then, the Jewish people have been coming home. It's a miracle, and we've been living in Bible prophecy ever since.
Do you think Jesus, who preached love thy neighbor, would be okay seeing a wall dividing people like that and cutting off people from their land?
He probably would have quoted Genesis 12:3 and said, I'll bless those who bless my people.
When you're talking, I feel like there's a lot of support and elevation of the Jewish people having Israel. But doesn't that contradict the principles of equality that Christianity preaches?
Well, then I think we'd have to go back to God and ask him why he chose the Jewish people. He chose them to be a light to the nations, according to his word.
Do you see how far off her thinking is, folks? Is Israel today, that modern Israel, as it stands right now, today, is it a light to the world? Think about it. Is it a light to the world? Is it the light and the salt that Jesus talked about? You will be light and you will be salt in the world. Is that Israel? Are we replacing the redeemed, the church, with unbelieving Israel? Is atheism the light of the world? Is Judaism that has rejected their Messiah, is that the light of the world? Or is the worship of Jesus Christ the light of the world? Which one is it, folks? Do you see how far afield our thinking can go when we are... I want to be kind. I don't want to put this in a way that people are going to misunderstand. When we have a wrong thinking, a wrong theology concerning this, we tend to defend our theology because people don't want to give up their paradigms. We will defend our paradigm to the bitter end, even to our own demise. Let's see just a little bit more.
Chose them to bring the Messiah through. I think the key is study what God says, not what man says.
To be clear,
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. Study what God says, not what man says. So she's thinking that she just represented what God says. God said, love your enemies. Do good to those who persecute you. Is that what is happening with Israel? Is Israel being good to the Palestinians? Is Israel loving their enemies? Or is Israel going after a people based upon their ethnicity and trying to exterminate them? Which one is it? You say that doesn't justify the evil act that was foisted upon Israel by Hamas. Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with that. No, it doesn't justify it. It does not justify it. I'm not justifying mass murder. I'm not justifying acts of terrorism resulting in mass murder. But folks, there are conflicting reports coming out of Israel now. You have the official mainstream media propaganda narrative that's being foisted upon us in the West. And then you've got people like this young lady here that have cell phones and they have cameras, and they're just ordinary people on the ground, and they're watching what's happening, and they are starting to get their information out, and it is beginning to contradict the official narrative that we're getting in the media. We don't live in a simple world, folks. We live in a complex world. Life isn't cut and dry. It's not an easy, we're just going to be good against evil, and we're going to be on the good side, and we're just going to destroy evil. I'm sorry, life doesn't work that way. Because even within ourselves, there's a battle between the evil of the flesh, of the old sin nature, and the good of the new nature that God has given us. And that's very complex. A lot of the epistles address that conflict within us. And so we're supposed to just declare ourselves the good guys when we have a conflict even within ourselves concerning that, and we're supposed to go after the bad guys. All Israel good, all Palestine bad. Be pro-Israel, destroy Palestine. That is very, very simplistic thinking that can be devastating, not only to the Palestinians, but to the entire world. Because if we can be that easily manipulated, that easily controlled through psychological warfare, to create an enemy and to go and extinguish that enemy when that enemy did nothing wrong and is innocent of all charges, and we think nothing of it, folks, that's psychopathic. We become psychopaths, and we become bloodthirsty warriors, warmongers, I should say, bloodthirsty warmongers, seeking the death and destruction of our fellow human being. And whether it's Hamas doing it, or whether it's Israel doing it in a form of revenge, it's still wrong. Either way. All right, let's move on. Let me go to the next segment. Now I want you to listen. I thought I had this set up. No, I don't. I want it to, let me set this up real quick. Let me move forward. Come on. I can't get it to. All right. I want you to hear. Now this is what he saw. What you see right there is the Balfour. That's the Balfour Declaration, and you can pause it and read it for yourself. But let me get here and see this devastation. It's horrible. But listen to this. Here we go. We'll go here. I think
the country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours, Arthur James Balfour.
All right, let's move on up. Here we go.
Live, because they have blocked off every means.
Go back.
For running your country at and portraying it as something else. This is a war. This is a.
I'm trying to get to the right spot. Here we go.
And portraying it as something else. If I can just continue for a moment, we saw Benjamin Netanyahu publicly announcing, so the whole world could hear, that he's ordering or telling the people of Gaza to leave Gaza Strip.
Let me go back. I'm sorry, folks. I'm trying to get to the right spot.
This is not a war.
Okay, this is not a war. I like that part.
Of current and clearly understood that nothing shall be done.
I'm sorry, folks. Hold on just a moment.
prejudice.
Right, it's hard to get to the right spot. Right here. Nope, go back.
Truth of current and historical events. His powerful vision lays bare the
right here.
And a testimony to his.
This is not a war. This is a bloodbath. This is a slaughter. This is genocide. And they are doing everything they can to completely exterminate the Palestinian people. This is ethnic cleansing, is what they're doing. And they've found all sorts of ways of slipping around that and portraying it as something else. If I can just continue for a moment.
Now, before you're critical of this man, he has been to Palestine. He has been to Palestine. He's talked with the Palestinian people. And he's been to Israel. And he knows both sides of this issue. This is what he has to say.
We saw Benjamin Netanyahu publicly announcing, so the whole world could hear, that he's ordering or telling the people of Gaza to leave Gaza Strip because we've had this, we're going to come in, we're going to take out everything, so you best leave. And as soon as he made that statement public, it was worldwide, he went in and he blew up the Rafah border crossing, the only way they've got of getting out. Bombed it twice. The Palestinian people refused to close the border crossing, and Egypt refused to close the border crossing, and Egypt was bringing truckloads of humanitarian aid, food, water, to these people. Israel blew up the crossing and then told Egypt that if it brings the trucks to the border, it will do an airstrike on the trucks. So it's not allowing any humanitarian aid in. Then it cut off the water supply. This is war crime. You can't cut off the water supply to anybody. We need water. Cut off the water supply, cut off the food supply, cut off the electricity supply. One might question why Israel is in control of Gaza's food, water, and electricity anyway. Don't they say that they give all this money to them and they've got this infrastructure? Why is Israel in control of any of this stuff? But anyway, that's a war crime. And then after he'd done that, today or yesterday, they dropped leaflets all over Gaza City telling people, we're going to take out Gaza City. You need to go to the south end of the Strip, down near Khan Yunis, and get out of Gaza City because we're going to bomb it tomorrow. Then people got on, I've got video footage of this, people got on large trucks, on tray-back trucks, their cars, they packed women and children, left Gaza City, they went south and they hit them with an airstrike. Killed an entire convoy of women and children fleeing to the south after they dropped leaflets telling them to go.
Now, does that sound like Hamas to you? The Palestinian Christians that you've seen already in this video, did they look like terrorists to you? Women and children who are just trying to flee for their lives, do they look like terrorists to you? Do they look like Hamas? Why are they being targeted? I know some of you are angry because you have not the ability to come out of your false paradigm. You don't have the ability to break through that wall that has so entrapped you into a false paradigm and false presuppositions. And anyone who would dare, I know this of some of you folks because I am exactly the way you are. This is me I'm describing. And I know myself. And I know once I get locked in on a paradigm, I am stubborn as could be. And it takes an act of God to break me out of it. We are a stubborn and stiff-necked people, even as Christians. And we want to believe what we want to believe. And how dare anyone challenge us with truth? And this is our mentality. Folks, lives are at stake. Innocent people are being targeted in the most vicious way. and falsely accused of something they never did, being associated with a terrorist organization that they are not a part of, and they are being exterminated. How can any Christian in the West ever support that? How can you support that and have a good conscience?
This is what they do. In the 2014 war, they told people to go and shelter at the UN school. They put that announcement out for 24 hours and made sure the school was full. And they bombed it and hit it with white phosphorus. They told more people to go and shelter in the desert because we're going to be bombing the city areas, go and set up tents in the desert. They did, and they dropped gas bombs on them in the desert and gassed them all. This is what Israel does, and that's what's happening in Gaza. This is not a war. This is a genocide. This is ethnic cleansing. They intend to leave no one alive because they have blocked off every means of escape while telling the world we're being humanitarian. We're telling them all to leave the danger zones. If they're not leaving, well, it's not our fault if they get killed, is it? This is how it's being portrayed.
Do you see how far afoot the propaganda coming out of the media is from what is being told to us from on the ground? This gentleman has people he knows in Palestine, and he's getting this information from these folks who are fleeing, trying to flee and stay alive from this vicious assault. This is what else he has to say.
Slaughter of children. There's over 1 million children in Gaza Strip, and you have the whole world cheering it on. These war criminals that we have in power, this is a war crime. This is ethnic cleansing. People have to understand, if you want to know how to heal the world, you first have to understand very, very clearly that the people who are running your country, if your country is supporting this incursion into Gaza Strip, then the people who are running your country are psychopaths. They are criminally insane, and they are sanctioning a war crime and getting all the world to cheer on to this blood sacrifice that they intend to do. And if you want to have any hope of surviving what's coming, you need to pull these people out of power right now and charge them with war crimes. If you can't do it in their courts, then form your own, because this needs to stop.
It does need to stop. And here's the thing, folks. If they will do this to Palestine, they will do it to you and me. Don't think they won't.
The only thing that's going to stop it is the people. Our leaders have sold us out. Our leaders have gone down this path of bloodlust. These people are criminally insane, and they need to be removed. I could go on and on, so I better...
I agree. I agree with what he's saying, folks. All right, let's move on to my last thing. We're running out of time here. I had more than I could get in within the allotted time. Okay, what happened here? Got John Hagee. Now I want you to hear John Hagee and compare what you just heard to what Hagee is going to tell us. Let me... This is 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Here we go.
Good morning, America and the world. Israel is at war. It has been over 48 hours since Palestinian terrorists from Hamas launched a widespread invasion of southern Israel. We now know that October the 7th, 2023, was the deadliest day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. More than 800 Israelis have been killed since the attack began, and Israeli National Security Advisor Ron Dermer believes the number of fatalities will rise to over 1,000. An additional 2,500 have been wounded, and it's believed that approximately 100 Israelis are being held prisoner by the Palestinian terrorists in Gaza. 9 Americans are among those killed, with an unknown number of Americans among the wounded and abducted. Hezbollah has threatened American troops throughout the Middle East should the United States enter this conflict. Since the unprovoked attack, Israel has routed the terrorists from all farming communities and towns bordering the Gaza Strip.
How do we know that? Let's stop. How do we know that? Just because Pastor Hagee says it Does that make it true? He's not there on the ground. He doesn't have contacts on the ground in Palestine. He doesn't know those people. Has he ever come on and said, pray for the Palestinian Christians? They're in a really, really bad situation. Has he ever done that, folks? Ever? Has he done that? I'll dare say he hasn't. What he has done is he has supported Israel in its assault upon those Christians. I want you to think about this, folks. This is a paradigm buster, and it is, I know, it's extremely disturbing to think that everything you believed up to this point, if you believed, that Israel could do no wrong, and no matter what Israel does, we have to support them. If that was your paradigm, and you're a Christian, and you have the Holy Spirit in you, if you're not conflicted right now, if you don't have a conflict, a very, very difficult conflict going on within you, if you're not disturbed, then I would suggest some serious self-examination.
Israel has routed the terrorists from all farming communities and towns bordering the Gaza Strip.
Now, what you saw earlier, where just mass number of people are being wiped out through death and destruction from these strikes of bombs and missiles and all of that. And people being told go this direction, and then they're hit with various weapons to just wipe them out. Does that sound like they're hitting only the terrorist? We are being lied to, folks. Go ahead.
More than 300,000 Israeli reservists have been mobilized, with indications that Israel is planning to extend its counterattack to a ground invasion of Gaza. This is the most rapid reservist call-up in Israel's history. Presently, the Israelis have amassed...
And why was that call-up? Did they need all of that to go after a small minority terrorist group that happens to set up its base in Palestine? Why do they need 300,000? Could it possibly be because their plan is to extinguish every living soul out of Palestine? To kill Muslims, Jews, Christians, men, women, and children who had nothing to do with that attack, and just wipe them all out. Could that be the reason for 300,000? I'll let you answer that question.
100,000 troops around the Gaza Strip and have engaged in an aerial bombardment of the coastal region for nearly 2 days. Following exchanges of artillery fire just this morning, Hezbollah terrorists infiltrated northern Israel. Following reports that Iran was behind the October 7th massacre, Jerusalem has also mobilized significant numbers of troops along its Syrian and Lebanese borders should the Iran-backed terrorist army decide to open up a second front against the Jewish state.
By the way, since this has been stated, there's news coming out that they've gone into Lebanon. They're gonna cause. We'll put it this way: they're gonna pull the trigger of the gun World War III and cause mass death and devastation. If we don't show restraint, if cooler heads don't prevail, this could be absolutely devastating.
I want to be clear. Israel will do whatever it deems necessary to protect its people, and we will vigorously stand with the Jewish state.
To what degree will we stand with the, quote, Jewish state, end quote? Remember, a state that is still under the judgment of God, that has not turned back to their Messiah. They are not the people of God. Unbelieving Jews have never been the people of God. It's always been the remnant. Study your Bible more carefully, folks. It's always been only the Jews that believed in the Messiah. And in our time, it's both Jew and Gentile that believe in the Messiah. Think about it. Is what John Hagee here saying, is it really true?
The world is different today than it was before this weekend's massacre. No longer is the distinction between good and evil so easily blurred by anti-Israel sympathizers in the media. A very clear line has been drawn in the sand, and everyone, both individuals and nations, must choose between Israel and the madness of terrorism.
Okay, that's what's called a false paradigm. That's what's called either or, the either or fallacy that he just gave, and I accidentally, I'll leave it there. That's all we need to see. That's the either or fallacy. Either you're standing with Israel or you're standing with the terrorist. You mean I can't pray for Palestinian Christians and without being called anti-Semitic? I can't pray for and support Palestinian Christians without being labeled a terrorist? Seriously? We can't provide, aid, medical aid and food and water to women and children without being called a terrorist? This is madness, folks. This is utter madness. And we in the Western world, we need to be better than this. We really do. All right, is this, let's see what this is. All right, here we go. I want you to hear a little bit of this, and then we'll end the video. Let me bring this up on the screen here. Let's bring this back to here.
Indian American journalist, and I've spent much of my career reporting on the occupied territories. But Hebron, one of the West Bank's largest cities, is also my roots. My father was born and raised here. I've returned to learn how the occupation has decimated his beloved hometown, a place he hasn't been back to in years.
I had a mixed feeling, nostalgia with anger, despair over despair. What can I say?
I know it's really hard for him to see this, and so it's emotional for me.
So we're officially on our way to Hebron.
My team and I are going to Hebron's Old City, which is ground zero of Israeli apartheid. Today, 33,000 Palestinians live in this part of Hebron, which is under full Israeli military control and fragmented by checkpoints, military outposts, and around 1,000 Israeli settlers who live here in violation of international law.
اللي حصل في البلدة القديمة في مدينة الخليل هي كارثة بندفع ثمنها كل يوم.
حياتكم هون صعبة؟
هي صعبة ومستحيل وحدة تقعد محل تجرب تقعد أسبوع.
إحنا عايشين هون بس باعتبار السجن.
But before we get into all of that, let me back up. It wasn't always like this.
I want to ask you something, folks. The folks that she's interviewing, do you really believe they're terrorists? Just because you've been fed that belief by the mainstream media? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to end this, folks. I'm way over time. I have so much more I want to give you on this. We're just scratching the surface. But understand, folks, don't just believe the simple narrative that you're being fed. Take the time to do your own homework. You know, when I was in law enforcement, we had a saying: ignorance of the law is no excuse. It doesn't get you out of having violated the law and having to face the consequences of that violation of the law. And I'm going to use that here as well. For Western Christians, ignorance of the reality of Palestine, that it's mostly, over 90% peaceful people who are just trying to survive and live their lives. Ignorance of that, and ignorance of the fact that there's a large population of Christians in the Gaza Strip, and the fact that any kind of terrorism coming out of there is a very, very small minority. Ignorance of that, I'm sorry, is no excuse. Why? Because it is our responsibility to take the time to learn the truth and to know these things. Because if we continue to propagate a lie, that's a sin. That's a sin before God. And we need to stop lying. Thou shalt not lie. Even if we repeat a lie ignorantly, thinking it's the truth, I think prudence and wisdom, as the scriptures would teach us, must prevail. And we have to take wisdom and prudence and take the time to make sure that what we believe to be the truth really is the truth, and that we are not inadvertently spreading deception. Because ignorance is no excuse, folks. It's time we take the time to make sure we're getting it right. Because when we don't, lives are devastated and people are hurt. And large segments of society are easily manipulated and controlled. And if they're easily manipulated and controlled, then that means that the people who are controlling them can name a common enemy and say, there's the bad guys. Let's go get them and wipe them out. Folks, is that not the same thing that Hitler did? Thanks for watching. God bless. We'll see you next time on the C-Files.